practicalities. Ines?
Yes, thank you very much, Nadia. So just a couple of practicalities about the webinar. So first of all, this webinar is being recorded, so everyone can watch it after. We have sign language interpretation. Yes, here is Ferdinand. So for anyone who needs that. We are having a small delay with the captioning, I'm afraid. So the captioner is joining at the moment. I will post in the chat the link to where you can follow captions. You need to copy paste this link into your browser, and you can watch captions. You can follow captions then in English, Spanish, Japanese, and French. We also have interpretation into Spanish. So if you would like to use that, just click on the bottom at the bottom of your screen. There is a button interpretation, and you just need to click on Spanish. Other than that, if you would like to ask a question, please use a question and answer box or the chat. And I think that is about it. If you would like to speak during the discussion, please use the raise hand function. So over to you, Nadia.
Okay, thank you very much. So once again, welcome to everybody. So my name is Nadia Haddad. I'm one of the co-chairs of ENIO. So this side event will highlight the worrying trend emerging globally through the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's the increasing perception of disabled people as vulnerable, as a steady return of the medical model of disability. As countries currently deal with the pandemic and embark on the process of recovery, it is very important to ensure that we move forward with the implementation of Article 19 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the General Comment 5 of it, and to prevent going back to segregation and charity. So the independent living movement has played a major role in getting people out of institution, ensuring they have access to personal assistance and that they are available to live in their own homes on their own terms. So the objective of this side event is to explore how joining forces and working together globally can play a role in the COVID-19 recovery, sharing good practices and helping to prevent a slide backwards. But first of all, I will give the floor to Sarah Londerville. She is the director of the National Council of Independent Living in the United States of America, and she will present us who is WIN. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Welcome everybody and hello. It's an absolute honor to be with you today, my friends. In 2017, independent living leaders from 19 countries gathered in Washington, D.C. for a historic Global Independent Living Summit, where we established a global network of independent living centers, the World Independent Living Network. It was a joyous occasion, and I can still feel the energy and excitement that brought to the summit and the powerful force of solidarity as we read out loud our promises to one another. Since then, our world has changed, but through it all, our commitment and unity has grown stronger. We've been conducting meetings to exchange ideas between regions, and we will continue to be active and expand this network globally. And we, disabled people around the world, more than ever, will continue to work together to face the challenges presented and work to spread the philosophies and values of independent living to all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for giving us this overview of how WIN started and the importance of independent living worldwide. So now we will have an overview of the WIN representatives, and they will speak, each of them, on how has the understanding of independent living changed during the COVID in his or her region. So the first speaker is Shafiq Uri Herman from Pakistan. He's a director of a Center of Independent Living, and he give his point of view on how they lived this pandemic. Shafiq, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So nice of you. It's great honor for me to speak with my friend after a long time. Thank you very much. And I am very happy to share the situation. This is the second learning of my life. First learning when there was an earthquake in 2005 in Pakistan, and people realized that in 56 seconds, 15,000 people got disability. And it was a turning point, the sensitization about the person with disability in Pakistan. And now the COVID, it create a big, a big chance to learn uh, the general public to learn how person with disability are living in isolation. We are the prisoner in our own homes without any crime, without any sin, without any mistake. Many of our fellows with severely disabilities, we are living in we are prisoner in our own homes. COVID-19 situation forced everyone to live in isolation or live in the home. We don't have to, everyone don't have to make the socialization. It's an anti-socialization, the situation. COVID situation is anti-socialization. So in Pakistan, we got the opportunity from disaster, and we started uh, advocacy to the general public to please realize the lifestyle of severely disabled person who are living all of their life in a closed rooms without sunlight, without the lights, without meeting with other people, without socialization. So just imagine how difficult is our life. So this is it's a disaster. Yes, it is disaster. COVID-19 is a disaster, but there is a huge opportunity as well. So it's a best time for us to do the positive advocacy to empower people and sensitize society about the living of for everyone. So due to that advocacy, now in Pakistan, it's amazing that all vaccination centers are accessible, and persons with disabilities are getting vaccination in their own homes. So also government is providing transportation, government is providing the best accessibility to everyone. We are included at least in this pandemic, and the vaccination is very much accessible in Pakistan, which is really amazing for us. It's really amazing for my life that I am watching a beautiful and very sustainable system first time in Pakistan without any discrimination, because we did the advocacy for 1 year and we got the impression of how to sensitize people to realize the everyone lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shafiq, for sharing with us on positive note of Pakistan. So the next speaker is the director of the Japanese Independent Living Center, Mitsutoshi. The floor is yours, please, if you can share with us your experience.
Thank you, Nadia. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me this precious opportunity today. I am a member of Japan Center for Independent Living, and today, let me share our experience of Japan. In Japan, initial CILs were established in 1980s, and there are currently 120 CILs nationwide, where staff with disabilities passionately make their efforts every day to support peers to be independent from institutions or parents' home. Thanks to the long-standing actions taken by CILs toward government, social security systems have developed in Japan, and 24-hour attendance services are guaranteed in almost all areas. That means any people with disabilities can spend independent living regardless of their income. However, it is also true that so many people with disabilities are being forced to live in institutions even now. I have been especially approaching special wards for people with muscular dystrophy and other neuromuscular diseases. There are 26 wards on the National Hospital Organization where more than 2,000 people are institutionalized under medical controls. We have conducted a nationwide movement named Project for the Future Liberation and Deinstitutionalization of the Wards for Muscular Dystrophy since 2019 to make a dynamic transition of people with NMD from those wards to the community. In doing so, we have witnessed tons of problems, and the most serious to the end of life with little freedom. The human rights of them are completely ignored. In addition, we haven't allowed to get in the wards after the COVID-19 pandemic, so we can't offer transition supports in a way that IL movement used to. However, we have succeeded in helping them transition by utilizing online tools. So we think that establishing a new transition system by combining online and offline supports is necessary to recover IL support from the pandemic. Thus, it is critically important than ever to move forward to achieve our mission, to promote transitions and accomplish the institutionalization in Japan. Why do they have to live up their life in a lonely, isolated place? It's so unfair. Free our people. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mitsutoshi, to share with us your daily strike. So we'll move now from Asia to North America. And the next speaker is Jessica Jimenez from the United States of America. Jessica, the floor is yours.
Hi, I was like, whoa, that was quick. Okay, so my name is Jessica Jimenez. I'm from the National Council on Independent Living. So to begin, I would say to understand how independent living has changed during COVID-19, you first need to understand that disasters can be in all forms, and people with disabilities are impacted 2 to 4 times. They're 2 to 4 times more likely to be hurt and die during these disasters, during any disasters. And due to the pandemic, these deaths, that number has increased. Not just in the pandemic, but other disasters in general. So a lot of deaths and illnesses occur in congregated facilities, in institutions, nursing homes, many different institutions and facilities. In the United States, many of the long-term service facilities, service support services are a result of institutional biases. So a lot of the money that the government sends to our support services go to large institutions that help put people in institutions. So the community, rather than community-based services that help let people live independently. So that has made it easy for people for people with disabilities to get put into institutions. I mean, while they're in hospitals, they can automatically be transferred to congregated facilities when they're hurt or when they're really sick and trying to get better. One program that has kind of helped but is really defunded is called the Money Follows the Person program. And this is something that was used last year. I don't really know the statuses this year. And this program actually helped a lot of people get out of nursing homes. So the money followed person. So states, during COVID, states have developed their own regulations, their own rules to help that are very harmful to people with disabilities on what they want, what they should do for the pandemic. The United States is built on both the federal and state regulations, so it's kind of not like the federal government can't say you need to do this when states officials like to say, well, our state doesn't want to do that. Then things go back and forth at the Senate and the House of Representatives. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we had a lot of life-threatening, life-saving treatments or that were denied and removed, and a lot of equipment that was taken away. I don't know if you recall many people that were getting really sick, and many individuals that would go into the hospital trying to receive treatment, and they were denied their ventilators because there were many people that had COVID-19 that needed ventilators, but because we had our system did not really care about getting the supplies needed, not just for COVID-19 patients, but also people with disabilities. So that wasn't a real main focus. And that should be something that we think about in the future, not just for US citizens, but those around the world, because a lack of supplies is just something that we should really focus on. Now, okay, I'll be really quick.
I ask you really to close now because
Okay.
now, Jessica.
Yeah, I will. I'm good. Okay, so now over the year of the pandemic, we still have a lot to go. I mean, the U.S. has tried to progress on response, getting a lot of some laws passed, but there are some things that still need work, especially for people with disabilities. We are happy with the administration, but there are some things that we still want to see for people with disabilities, getting them out of institutions, and we'd like to pave the way on that. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jessica.
Mhm.
We will move now to your neighbor, the northern neighbor. So the next speaker is Laura Hochman from Canada. Laura, the floor is yours, please.
Good morning, everyone from the West Coast of Canada. I'm Laura Hochman. I'm the Executive Director of Independent Living Vernon. We're one of 25 centers here in Canada. Across Canada, like many other countries, as COVID-19 spread, IL centers here, we witnessed years of work for equality in human rights, social justice, training, advocacy, all to improve the lives of people with disabilities, basically disappear. It was replaced with this emphasis on the medical model.
Excuse me so much for interrupting, but the subtitles have disappeared.
Okay, we'll try to find a solution for that technically. Thank you.
Thank you.
So within days of the pandemic arriving here in Canada, we saw triage criteria in hospitals, and the process, the processes at local hospitals explicitly put the lives of people with disabilities at the bottom. Consumers within our centers, they were expressing terror and immense grief about the risks they faced of being left to die without medical support if they contracted COVID-19, or if they were, in institutions and assisted living facilities. They also talked about complications they experienced from interruption to much needed therapies, limited access to PPE, and the increased costs related to COVID-19. And it was so tough when we heard the stories of Canadians with disabilities who were left to die in assisted living institutions or died alone with no support person with them. The pandemic here in Canada, like many other countries, highlighted the risk experienced by people with disabilities when they're not allowed to have full control over their lives and their care. So this reinforced the need for independent living philosophy to drive change globally. Throughout the pandemic, we really drew strength from independent living philosophy. It helped our centers to be able to mobilize supports, get creative about how to address barriers that were created with every change that was made. Peer support by phone, email, and physically distance became essential for people with disabilities who were completely isolated. IL Center's ability to create, accessible and timely information about the constantly changing government and community services locally and nationally became a full-time job for our centers. Our, IL Center's expertise in accessibility was essential to adapting services to be delivered online with a quick turnaround. Many centers across Canada expressed that that demand for their services increased during the pandemic, not only because of our expertise in accessibility, but also because many other community services temporarily closed down, leaving gaps in service, and that IL Centers had to fill. And so, with the expertise and the lived experience of people with disabilities guiding our work in community, we were able to reduce gaps. We were able to provide essential support to people with disabilities and the community. This just reinforces and provides evidence about the essential role that IL plays within the community, within our world globally. So I want to thank everyone for joining this session and for everyone who's really working tirelessly to improve the lives of people with disabilities and increase access. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. So we are moving now to Central America, and our next speaker will be Wendy Barrantes Jimenez, and she is the director of the Independent Living Center in Costa Rica. Wendy, the floor is yours.
Muy buenos días a todos y a todas.
Latin America is one of the most unequal regions of the world. It is estimated that it has a population of 635 million people, of which 13% are people with disabilities. In Latin America, the governments and the state parties don't have a clear concept of independent living, and because of this, most of them don't consider it important to legislate to create figures like the safeguard for decision making or the personal assistance services, both which are of utmost importance for the people with disabilities to be included within the community, being respected as decision makers in subject matters of their interest. However, this has been changing gradually just thanks to the work of the civil organizations, especially the Center for Independent Living, Morpho, and the Latin American Network for Independent Living. But just like the rest of the world, the pandemic has unmasked the discrimination and segregation that the population with disabilities has been subjected to. With the sanitary measurements taking place, the social reclusion and exclusion of people with disabilities has worsened, in turn increasing the violations of human rights. Both the right to quality education and access to quality health services has diminished, so much so that they are not considered a priority group for vaccination. For example, in Argentina, out of 100 people with disabilities, 7 have died from COVID. In contrast, out of 100 people without disabilities, 2.2 have died from the virus. And yet we're still being left behind. All of the above goes into detriment of personal autonomy of people with disabilities, which is already devalued in the region because of the authorities to continue to ignore or not consider our opinion at all. Which is reflected every time that the new sanitary measurements are developed against COVID or for economical reactivation. People with disabilities are always being left out, and their services like personal assistant are constantly being relegated to care or health services. Independent living for people with disabilities is a subject that we cannot keep postponing in Latin America. Our voices should not be silenced anymore or being substituted by the so-called experts that know little to nothing about our needs. We are worried that the advancements that we have had for the personal autonomy with people with disabilities could be reverted because of the pandemic, which threatens to perpetuate medical models which see people with disabilities as weak, subject to protection and care within the institutions. Let's change this outdated vision of people with disabilities so this pandemic won't turn into a pretext to continue leaving people behind.
So now we are moving to Europe. And the next speaker is Jamie Bolling from Sweden. She's the director of the Independent Living Institute in Stockholm.
Hello, and thank you, Nadia. Yes, those from Sweden, but also from Europe. I'm the co-director, or not the co-director, also on the board of the Independent European Network on Independent Living. What have we seen the impact when it comes to the COVID? Death, isolation, segregation, and a need for more mobilization of our organization to keep our rights, what people have been talking about. The deaths in the institutions, it made the headlines here in Sweden, it made the headlines in the world, how people were dying in the homes for the elderly. And it means it's showing that we need to close the institutions now, not wait any longer. We've been asking for this for many years to the independent living movement, but it still hasn't happened. Isolation, people in group homes, we're not allowed to have visitors, we're not allowed to leave in Finland. This is going against people's rights. You can't have somebody come to your home. So there's now a case in Finland against the government between for independent living, and that you can't just because of COVID take away people's rights. The segregation that we've seen, a lot of it when it comes to the digital competence, where you're separating those who have and those who have not. Those who have good iPhones and computers and the knowledge of using them, to people who don't have this equipment and do not have the knowledge. They've been segregated away from the information system. We work in Sweden with immigrants, the refugees coming to Sweden. There was also the problem of accessing the information in general about COVID. We saw the right to mobilize more so than ever, because all of a sudden rights were going to be suspended. Access to this social service, access to some personal assistance. Even here in Sweden, it was asked if they could just suspend this for a while. You can't just suspend our lives. We need that. You don't suspend it in times. So these were problems. So death, isolation, segregation, a need to mobilize. COVID has meant so much work, and unfortunately too many deaths. So let's work for deinstitutionalization. I close there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamie, for sharing with us this overview from Europe, and I think also worldwide. Sadly enough, there was no voices from Africa this time, but I hope that the next time we will definitely have a representative from Africa. Then we can really say that we are worldwide heard. So before to go to the next part of this side event, I would encourage really all the participants to write already their question down at the chat box, or share thoughts, share experience, so that we can learn with each other, and don't hesitate to ask questions to all the speakers. So the next speaker will be a video message from Professor Jared Quinn. He is United Nations Special Reporter on the rights of persons with disabilities. You missed the sound.
Sorry, I cannot join you.
Oh,
sorry, let me try again then. Sorry about that. Sound. Sorry, let me try again. Share screen. Okay. Should work now. Sorry.
Hello, my name is Jared Quinn, and I am the UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I'm very sorry I cannot join you live today. I was asked to say a few general things about independent living by Enel and Validity, and I'm very happy to do so. I do so with a little trepidation because we really haven't made as much progress as we could have and should have in the last few years. So my first point is that institutionalization, to me, is segregation in its most extreme form. Why do I say this? I say it because, to me, the key norm in the UN CRPD is actually Article 5, the prohibition of discrimination in the form of segregation. You don't even need Article 19 to establish this point. Secondly, I think personhood is the lens through which we should view and parse Article 19. Personhood is the very foundation stone of the Convention, and encoded in Article 19 is the idea of home. Very simple idea. A place of seclusion, of reflective space, a place of privacy and intimacy, a space that reflects back our sense of self. I've heard it described as the scaffolding of the self. But it's also a pathway to public space, deep connections with the community. We are, after all of us, a reflection of the depth and breadth of our human connections. Our home invites others in as much as it preserves and protects our private sphere. It's simply inconceivable that humans, including persons with disabilities, can develop within the four walls of an institution, no matter how small the institution is. Always remember also Article 8, sensitizing the population at large to the rights of persons with disabilities. Do you really think a congregated solution achieves that? I very much doubt so. Third of all, in the past, segregation in the form of institutions was considered a satisfactory policy outcome. That time is gone, long gone. I would suggest that Article 5 on ending discrimination in the form of segregation says so, with no exceptions and no mental reservations. Article 5 is the essential backstop of the CRPD against segregation in its most extreme form of institutionalization. So I would suggest Article 19 contains the positive side of the philosophy of home. It points the way forward. Of course, it means undoing decades, if not centuries, of investment in segregated solutions. Of course, it means reinvesting in community supports. By the way, this is woven of the same cloth as the debate about the development of non-coercive, community-based supports for persons with mental health issues, and I applaud the launch of the WHO study on this point last week. It's also part and part of the revolution in service paradigms that is long overdue in every corner of the world. We see very interesting positive trends nowadays toward the personalization of services, the devolution of budgets, and indeed even the movement toward platform-based services, with promises as well as risks yet to be explored. Increasingly, we do have the means to make this a reality. And crucially, and lastly to me, all of this means Article 5 combined with Article 19 combined with Article 8, not spending one penny on recovery funds to refurbish the past in terms of institutional solutions and settings. This is critically important as we go forward. Building back better must mean a frank acknowledgement that what we built in the past was not fit for purpose, and we need to radically change gear into the future. I wish you well, and I thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, albeit via video today.
Okay, thank you, Ines, for sharing this with us. So very clear messages from the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disability that we should definitely take on and work on it. So our next speaker is Shano Park. He is the director of the CU Center of Independent Living, advocating for independent living in South Korea and the potential of a draft of denationalization law. Shano, the floor is yours.
In Korea, independent living paradigm was introduced about 20 years ago, and now it became the basic of the government policy. But the number of institutions are still increasing, especially for intellectual disabled people. The president promised to make a support center for getting out of institution, but it is not implemented yet. Last year, the first death by COVID in Korea was a mental disabled person who was in hospital for 20 years. There were clusters at many institutions. Disabled people living in groups are more easily impacted than those who live independently in the community. So, for the safety of life, independent living became more important. DPOs are demanding emergency support for the residents to get out of institution. On December of last year, the National Assembly members proposed the Act on support for disinstitutionalizations of persons with disabilities. This law includes the definition, the role of the government, and the aim to close institutions in 10 years. Some parents and institution workers are against this law, but the law should be passed based on CRPD and the strong need of disabled movement. Getting out of institution is not a choice, but our basic right as a citizen. The government has a duty to implement. We should make action, pressure, and monitor the government for our right. Finish.
Thank you very much, Shano, to share with us your fight, in fact, to get denationalization on codes and law. Thank you very much. So I'm honored to announce our next speaker, who is Amelia Kamiorios. She is the vice chair of the CRPD committee, and she's a member of the working group on denationalization. Amelia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nadia. It's a big honor being here with so many people fighting for independent living for so many decades. I was in Chicago in 1980 for an internship and I had the opportunity to experience part of the big movement. Institutionalization without consent is a human rights violation. State parties of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities are obligated to end this and support independent living, developing policies with the social model of disability, creating support and eliminating the barriers to inclusion of persons with disabilities in all aspects of life. Everyone deserves the opportunity to develop themselves and to contribute to society. Article 19 and General Comment number 5 of the Convention contemplate two concepts: the right to an independent life, which refers to an individual dimension, and the right to be included in the community, which implies a social dimension. Living independently means that persons with disabilities have all they need to exercise control over their lives and make all decisions that affect them. To be included in the community entails leading a full social life and having access to all services offered to the public, to support services and personal assistance based on individual needs, but refer to living outside of residential institutions of all kinds, and above all, not losing personal choice and autonomy as a result of an imposition. Article 19 and General Comment 5 clearly state the responsibilities of states, so there is not room for not implementation. Despite this, in the context of COVID-19, the risks faced by persons in institutionalized settings were severe, with many deaths as a result of infection. Yes, the pandemic has shown a real risk of reverting to the medical model of disability. We should ensure that as humanity recovers from this pandemic, we take a sustainable and human rights-based approach to building back better. In the 23rd session, we, committee experts, decide to establish a working group for the institutionalization. The first step was, in this 2021, organizing a series of online consultations with persons with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities by regions: Central Europe, Latin America, Asia Pacific, European Union, North America, Caribbean, Africa, and Middle East, to provide an opportunity for persons with disabilities to voice their experiences, opinions, and proposals on how to address the current situation, which have exacerbated inequalities. Based on the contributions, the committee will prepare a first draft guidelines on the institutionalization, including in emergency situation. The ultimate goal is to reinforce the operationalization of the right to living independently and being included in the community. During the consultations, all the presentations were extremely important. We were able to observe time and again complaints about forced internment, coercion, lack of privacy, unhygienic environments, forced abortions, sterilizations, and treatments, not preventive measures in time of COVID-19. Staffs were scarce and poorly trained. The information was null or in inaccessible formats. The states do not have accessible support services in the community, not personal assistance or peer-to-peer support. Persistent denial of their equality before the law, and the absence of support for decision-making, absence of reasonable accommodation in the delivery of justice, and many situations that we are aware of, violation of many articles of the Convention. As indicated in Article 4.3 of the Convention, civil society has always participated with the committee through its shadow reports, but this time it was a direct dialogue on a specific topic, and they really felt taken into account because it was also an issue that has been of urgent attention for all. This was a fantastic, inclusive, valuable experience. In addition to providing us with important inputs for the preparation of the guidelines, was raising the committee to exercising with greater impetus the motto, nothing of persons with disabilities without persons with disabilities. I conclude by saying the institutionalization is about human rights. We should change the shameful approach of protection for the very worthy approach of support. Segregating persons with disabilities in institutions denigrates their dignity as human beings and ours for allowing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amelia, to share with us some of the outcomes of the consultation. And it's incredible how that it's still possible that in 2021 forced sterilization and other things are still happening. But we are looking forward for the outcomes. And then last but not least, the next speaker is Lady Judy Herman, who is going to one of the biggest and most inspiring women in the independent living movement. And we are honored to have her with us today. She will give a global perspective on independent living and some key messages from the future. Judith, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. And thank you, Nadia, so much. And I want to start off by really congratulating those people who had the vision for creating the World Independent Living Network in 2017. I think the gathering of voices from around the world who are working on independent living is really critical. And we can see in the presentations today that our voices are getting stronger, that our vision is very similar. We are fighting for equality. And we believe that independent living is one of the critical elements that we need to be fighting for to enable the voices of disabled people to be heard and to be recognized within our society and within the halls of our governments. I'd like to reflect on a few issues. In the United States and in all the countries that we've heard from, we've seen that one of the reasons why we have been able to somewhat reduce the adverse impact of COVID on the lives of disabled people is because we have been establishing recognized political movements, independent living in our countries. So we are being heard in a way that we previously were not. Now it is very clear that we are not being heard enough. And I want to thank Gerard and Amelia for their excellent comments, particularly given the role that they play in the international arena. No one yet has mentioned the issue of media. And I really would like to raise this point quickly. Our societies know about us positively, negatively, or not at all by how we are reflected in the media. And if we are not able to get issues like COVID and the disproportionate number of disabled people who have died as a result of COVID because of poverty and lack of quality health care and institutionalization and lack of community supports. If we can't get the general public to understand that we are fighting not just for our rights, but for their rights, I find that one of the big problems is that the vast majority of non-disabled people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s do not look at the fact that they are at risk of isolation or institutionalization. They don't see themselves as having the possibility of acquiring a disability. And when they think of disability, they feel threatened instead of really engaging and preparing for their future with us. I also feel that our movement must be doing much more to represent the breadth of our movement. In the United States and around the world, a substantial number of the people who have died in institutions or in isolation are those who are older. They all have disabilities, but in many cases, we are not really working with them as we need to, and they don't want to see themselves as having a disability because of stigma. These are issues we have to address. Likewise, we really need to expand our movement to be doing more work with parents of children who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. We need to be working closer with organizations run by and support the development of organizations run by people who have, who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as working more with people who have mental health disabilities. COVID, as we know, will result in more people having mental health disabilities. And so I feel like we are really at a precipice. We know that what we are fighting for is correct. And I definitely agree that we need to be fighting against the medical model, but we likewise need to be fighting for quality health care. People need to understand that when quality health care is not provided to its citizens, disabled or not, the death rates are higher. And in the United States, where 600,000 people have almost already died we know that at least half of those have disabilities. So I look forward to the continuing growth and development of WIN, of the independent living movements in our countries, and are strengthening and expanding the voices of disabled people of all ages with all types of disabilities, and that we are more demanding of media, that they represent us authentically and include us always. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judith, for those wise words and advice. And we hope that we can really go all together in the same direction. So now I will open the floor to questions to the audience. And there was already one question that have been asked: how can we address support and access to care for people who cannot communicate? Does any of you have any idea about how we can facilitate this easily so that we can inspire each other? So if one of the speakers having a good practice, just jump in and take the floor.
Okay, Amelia, okay. Yes, well, Article 21 of the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities clearly say that states parties should have the all the papers, all the communication should be in a modes and means accessible to people, persons with disabilities. It means interpreter of sign language, or braille in the documents, and of course media, as Judy said. Media, it's important, and it's a mean to communicate with the persons with disabilities, and it should be in a modes that people, deaf people or blind people could understand and could be communicated. In the COVID-19, it was a very, very big problem because the states parties has not been able to have modes and means to in a ways to people with disabilities could communicate. So this is the way to be able to implement the Article 21 of the convention. And civil society should push to the governors to realize this, to be able to give these opportunities to persons with disabilities. Thank you.
This is Judy. There was a television program in the United States on for 3 years. What name was it called? I used augmentative communication. About a young boy who uses augmentative communication. And programs like this, I think, are really helpful in allowing people to understand different ways that people communicate. So again, I think it's really important that we are pushing for appropriate representation in the media, because it gets to a much larger segment of people.
Okay, thank you very much. In the meantime, I will ask maybe Carlos, there are some questions in the chat box in Spanish. If you can help us, please, to translate them. But in the meantime, I just wanted to ask maybe also a general question to Amelia and Judith, as you have been also an advisor during the Obama legislation. So how can we, as disabled persons organization, reclaim the rights? Because there was always a big difference between rights in written, but then practicalities. You know, during the COVID, people were struggling but daily surviving, and support had just cut it from one day to another. And so people were just in the surviving modus. So claiming individualized support from somebody who needed was far away from reachable. So how can we use maybe law or legislation or fast implementation of something like that that can be a big support for us?
It's a great question, Nadia. And I think as we come out of COVID, we really, as WIN and independent living organizations in our respective countries, really need to learn about the lessons that we learned and what needs to be happening in the future. I have to say that, and I don't mean just to speak about the US, but for a moment I will. And that is that I really could see that the growth and strengthening of the movement in the United States has meant that we have better connections with members in our elected representative bodies at the national and state level. And that has been one of the reasons why bad policies that were coming forward were able to be turned around pretty quickly. And more money is being put into community-based personal assistance services. In many countries, the issue is enabling disabled people and others to understand what their rights are at their national and local level, which is why I think peer support that all of our programs are involved with is so very important, helping people to be able to understand in the most basic ways what their rights are under the law and other people that they can speak to when they need help. Because peer support, I think, especially in times of crisis, is so important to be able to identify someone that you know and trust who can be your ally.
Thank you. Amalia, do you have something that you want to add?
Can I have a question?
Yes, Shafiq, go ahead.
Yes. My question to my mentor, Judy Herman. Judy, actually, I found there are only two challenges we are facing. One is the mobility, and then the other one is communication. But in the world, usually person with disability labeled with their physical appearance or their mental capacity or their abilities, like people label like polio people, cerebral palsy people, spinal cord injury people, or muscular dystrophy, or intellectual disability, and that kind of title put on human by human. But do you think that now this is a time to make or label the services like communicational disabilities to the put disability on services instead of titling or the labeling human by their appearance? Thank you.
Thank you, Shafiq. And everyone should turn their camera on if you can. So I think, Shafiq, your point is really very important. And we do need to be looking at what people's individual needs are, and they will fall into different categories. And the ability to really help people get assessed for what they may need in communication or personal assistance or reading or employment, whatever it may be, we need, and I think that's one of the real strong values of independent living, is that we really are able to, as peers, have discussions with people about what the comprehensive areas that we need to address, and to help people not only link up to services, but also to get the services which are being provided done so in a way which is really integrated into the entire life of the person. And so I think sometimes, obviously, looking at the type of disability a person has may be very important in order to ensure that they are getting certain services and supports. But at the end of the day, we want people out of stovepipes. And so only putting people in a particular category based on a certain service, I think, does a disservice for the individual.
Sorry.
Nadia, may I?
Yes, but before I give you the floor, I will just add two questions. That is, one question was about how the United Nations can support the civil society. And another question was, what can donors do to support WIN on using maybe Article 32 to on international cooperation to encourage independent living? So go ahead, Amelia.
Yes, well, states parties are obligated to submit their progress in implementation the convention. The committee sends its recommendations, which are binding, and this is the way in which the committee can follow up with the countries, the implementation. The organization of persons with disabilities have to send their shadow reports, which are fundamental for us to make recommendations, since they are much closer to reality than the reports of the states. Each country has different solutions. As each person with disability has different support needs. So the support that committee give to the states or to the civil society is to having their shadows reports, and we are able to send the recommendations to the states parties based in these shadow reports. And as I said in my presentation, with consulting with the civil society as we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amelia. And some people are also asking, can we enforce, for example, when we see that the local government is spending again money on building new institutions, we will ring on the alarm bell. Will there be, is there a more value that we inform the CRPD committee, or does we need to go through other legislation?
This is Judy.
Yes.
I mean, I would suggest it's all the above. So first of all, I think what's very important is looking at your country's legislation as it's being developed, or particularly if it's going to be amended or you need it amended, to deal with the provisions around what we call in English enforcement. Meaning, if you have a complaint around, for example, the construction of new institutions, is there a body that you can complain to? Is there a way that action can be taken against what's happening? Because enforcement is critically important. Obviously, also, the strength of your organization, as Amelia was saying, when your country has to submit its report, having meaningful shadow reports is very important. And knowing the schedule of when your country is going to have a report due will enable you to be gathering information that you can be collecting so that when the shadow report goes in, you are prepared. But at the end of the day, making the CRPD live in your countries means that we have to make sure that the laws that are being passed and implemented in our countries are strong. And we also need to look at the issue of financing. I think financing is critical. No, I don't need to tell any of you this. And I think we continue to need to look at where the dollars are coming from to deal with issues like home and community-based services. And depending on the country that we're living in and whether we're getting support from external organizations for loans or grants to our governments, we need to make sure that disability is being integrated into all of the programs that are being developed.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying this. I will give now the floor to Wendy. She wanted to respond to the question of roots from Latin America. Go ahead, Wendy.
Sí, muchas gracias.
Nadia, I know it takes a little bit longer, but in this case, I will be doing consecutive translation because I cannot do simultaneous translation. That's beyond my capacity. So.
A la pregunta que hizo la compañera Ruth de qué va a ser de nosotros las personas con discapacidad y de nuestra vida independiente, yo creo que eso va a depender mucho de nosotras las personas en situación de discapacidad. Como bien lo dijo Judith y como ya lo ha dicho también la señora Amelia Kamiorios, eso va a depender mucho, bueno, pienso personalmente, de la fuerza que tengamos las organizaciones de personas con discapacidad. Al menos lo ubico acá en América Latina. Nosotros tenemos que fortalecernos mucho como red, no solamente a nivel mundial, sino también a nivel latinoamericano, para poder trabajar fuertemente. ¿Qué va a pasar con nosotros? ¿Qué va a pasar con el movimiento de vida independiente? Lo que nosotras, las personas con discapacidad, querramos que pase. Si queremos trabajar, vamos a trabajar para que nuestros marcos jurídicos reconozcan nuestros derechos.
Okay, so to the first question that Ruth asked about what is going to happen with people with disabilities and our organization, she says that we need to really empower ourselves as a network, not only the global network, but the Latin American network. If we want to work and we want to really push for the legislation to recognize what we're doing, what's going to happen with people with disabilities and their organizations, whatever we want to happen. We need to really fight for what we need and what our rights are when it comes to independent living around the world.
Esta pandemia, si bien es cierto, ha venido, como decía anteriormente, a desenmascarar muchas de las discriminaciones que nosotros hemos pasado constantemente y históricamente. Pienso también que es una buena oportunidad para que nos unamos más que nunca para trabajar juntos y trabajar más para que, como decía, se cumplan nuestros derechos. Gracias.
Even though the pandemic has come to unmask all the discriminations that we have been historically subjected to, it is also an opportunity for us to get together and actually demand our rights and really fight for what we deserve.
Así es que sigamos trabajando.
So let's keep working hard together.
Okay, thank you very much. So again, the importance to join our forces. I'm looking at the time and I'm considering we are nearby the end. I will give a last opportunity to all the speakers, a last round. If you have a short statement, a short thought, a short something that you want to share with us, just unmute yourself and take the floor.
Thank you. It's Amelia.
Yes, please.
I would like to say, as I said in my presentation, that the consultation was a very, very important exercise. We have the opportunity to see how people, what persons with disabilities are fighting for the living independent, and they are working together with us, the committee, and I want to reinforce these opportunities. So don't forget the committee is open to hear everyone, and in the website of the committee, we open to the opinions and contribution of the civil society of persons with disability. This is the most important thing. We are together in this fight. Everyone have a responsibility, and we are with you and you are with us. Please go with the committee to contribute with your opinions, your experience, and everyone we can put in the guidelines. It would be a very important thing. And thank you very much for permit me to be here, and congratulations. I'm very happy to be with Judy and with every people in the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amelia. And we know where to find you, so you will hear about us. Thank you very much. Judith?
I just want to say thank you for everyone who organized this. And it makes me very emotional. For those of you who know me, I always get emotional. But I think we should feel so proud of the work that we have done. And yet we are appropriately frustrated and angry about how much our voices are still not being listened to. And obviously everyone on this video today and thousands of people around the world who are fighting for independent living need to continue to reinforce each other. Following what Amelia is saying in relationship to informing the committee, I think is very important. Don't worry about how it's organized. Send letters, send whatever it is, so they just get information. Shadow reports are great, but they're only for a certain period of time. And with what's been going on in COVID, allowing the committee to understand both the positive and negative, and positive because I think, as I said, many of you in your countries really have been doing work raising this issue in a way that 10 years ago would not have happened. So we need to look at the progress that we're making. We need to support each other, and we need to speak up, speak loudly and proudly, and bring the broader community with us. Thank you all. I look forward to the next discussion.
Thank you very much. And now I think together with my colleagues from the WIN, we will share with you a global call that we are launching today and hope that we can all work on it together. So in conclusion of our first joint side event during this conference of state parties to the CRPD, the World Independent Living Center Network, WIN, calls upon all governments, intergovernmental organizations, the civil society, and all others around the world to do as follows. First of all, adapt a common definition of independent living, align with Article 19, the General Comment 5, and the independent living philosophy. So according to this, all persons with disabilities have the right to choose to live independently and freely, inclusive within the community. So independent living provides persons with disability with the right to take control over their life and to personal autonomy. Jessica?
We hope that they recognize the impact that COVID-19 has on our lives of people with disabilities. COVID-19 has exacerbated the exclusion of persons with disabilities, deepening existing inequalities. This is especially evident in rural areas of developing countries, where resources are extremely limited. In most countries, due to the lack of support and funding by governments, for personal assistance services, PAs were not treated as essential workers. This has negatively impacted and affected independent living organizations that are losing and no longer getting funding, and those that rely on these services on a daily basis. So in many countries, we have witnessed eugenic practices being put in place with persons with disabilities considered not worthy of life-saving treatment. So yes. Wendy?
3. Adoptar planes de desinstitucionalización de emergencia. El gran número de muertes de personas con discapacidad dentro de las instituciones se debió a la
was
propia
due to the
naturaleza
very
de esas
nature
estructuras
of
y
these
sistemas
segregating
segregadores.
structures
Sin
and
embargo,
systems.
como los gobiernos están
Still, as
empezando a
governments are
levantar las
beginning to
restricciones,
lift
las
restrictions,
soluciones que han comenzado a
solutions
proponer
that
no
have
son
begun to
aceptables.
proposing
Sugieren que
are
las
not
personas con
acceptable.
discapacidad
They
deben
suggest
mudarse a
that persons with
instituciones
disabilities
residenciales y
should
no
move
pueden
into
sobrevivir
residential
solas.
institutions
Sobre la
if
base de
they
las
cannot
lecciones
survive on their
aprendidas
own.
durante la pandemia,
Based on the
los
lessons
gobiernos
learned during
deben
the pandemic,
invertir urgentemente en
governments
planes de
must urgently
acción y
invest in
desinstitucionalización
efficient
y presupuestos
deinstitutionalization
adecuados
laws
para realizar
and
planes de
action plans
transición. Deben garantizar que ningún
with
tipo de
very clear
financiamiento,
timelines, independent monitoring
privada o pública
mechanisms,
destinada a
and
la
adequate
recuperación del
budgets
COVID-19
to
vaya a
realize
parar a
transition
instituciones
plans.
de ningún
They
tipo.
should ensure that no private or public funding aimed at COVID-19
Mitsutoshi?
recovery goes into institutions of any kind.
To future violations of independent living. Now that everyone around the world has experienced what being controlled by others feels like, let us use this to raise our voice for the institutionalization and self-determination. We need awareness campaigns to encourage real inclusion and help the paradigm shift at a political and social level in mainstreaming disability inclusion into all aspects of life. In addition, We need all the governments to understand that the process of recovery cannot be achieved without meaningful involvement of persons with disabilities and their organizations from the beginning to end. Shafiq?
Yeah, recognize the importance of the global independent living movement. At this moment in time, the independent living movement provides practical, inclusive solutions to persons with disabilities, such as peer support and personal assistance, so they can live their lives as they wish and not find themselves institutionalized. Our movement promotes empowerment for all persons with disabilities and the full exercise of all their civil, political, social, and economic rights. Laura?
Thank you. We, the World Independent Living Center Network, WIN, must be involved in the COVID-19 recovery. We, as persons with disabilities, share common values and challenges that go beyond nationality, race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, being young or old. We've come together as WIN to advocate on behalf of persons with disabilities from around the world until every person has their freedom. As WIN, we will be a watchdog. We will monitor, report, and propose solutions so that states parties can comply with their obligations under Article 19 and the convention as a whole. As WIN, we want to lead and support the process of deinstitutionalization. We can do this through expansion of the independent living movement all around the world to ensure persons with disabilities know their rights through peer support and the establishment of independent living centers, which can play a major role in supporting the transition of persons with disabilities from institutions into communities. We invite you to join us in this mission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to all my colleagues. Thanks to Ines, Masami, Natasha, and all the others who worked a lot on this behind the scene. And also I want to thank the sign language interpreters and also those who facilitated for us the captioning. So thank you all. Let's join forces. Let's make this building back better a reality for all of us, those who can speak and those who are not visible. So, and I hope that we next time we can represent really all the continents from all over the world, and that we are really built a stronger network, and that we all can go to the same direction. Thank you all. We will send you definitely from WIN, we will send you a report, we will send you the link to this recording webinar. We will keep you posted and hope that we meet each other very soon to continue together. Thank you all very much. And sorry for the interpreters if we get a little bit 4 minutes after our time. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Judy. I love you.
I love you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Laura,
Bye.
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 Jessica, Sarah,
Bye.
Ines, thank you
Bye.
very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.